Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
FTX goes MIA with an IOU that leaves customers SOL while buying IEX to access the SEC. Australia deals with MetaBank Fallout by proposing ransomware ban, and almost all organizations affected by cyber supply chain breaches. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and expertise on these stories and more from our guest, John Scrimsher, the CISO at Kontoor Brands. John, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, before we move on, we got to thank our sponsor, App Omni, secure third-party apps to keep SaaS data safe. Remember, you can join us on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOseries.com, hit the events dropdown, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. It's the 1, 2, 3rd one down. Just click on it to join us. We've got about 20 minutes, though, so let's jump right into the news. As we alluded to at the top of the show, FTX goes MIA with an IOU that leaves customers SOL. It is truly acronym soup. Yes, you heard that right. The crash of cryptocurrency exchange FTX saw $10 billion of customer funds transferred to founder Sam Bankman-Fried's own trading company, Alameda Research, a move he said was not secret, but also mentioned that the missing funds, that they had confused internal labeling that they misread. Later this week, it was revealed that earlier, Bankman-Fried had bought a 10% stake in U.S. stock trading platform IEX with an option to buy it out completely in the next 2.5 years. The partnership gave the 30-year-old executive the opportunity to lobby IEX's regulator, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, on crypto regulation. So, John, makes definitely for some interesting reading in the way that cryptocurrency is being steered far away from perhaps its initial intentions, and something FTX has been pretty explicit about in a lot of their broadcasting. And although crypto is not a cybersecurity issue per se, seems to be revealing some new twists in the golden rule. The one who has the gold makes the rules. As a CISO, I'm curious, what are your takes on the FTX story?
Well, I think first off, FTX is it's a very evolving story. We're getting new information on a daily basis right now, so it's hard to say a whole lot about it. It does really highlight the need that as a CISO that we need to make sure that we're working with our CFOs and part of the risk management program to make sure they're aware of the risks of the volatility in crypto and everything else, and then kind of watching out for the potential regulatory concerns. The whole, as you mentioned, moving away from its initial intentions of being a by the people for the people type of commerce. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot more regulatory moves there. I mean, as of yesterday, we're already hearing about the Federal Reserve in New York partnering with some large banks and credit card companies on a new digital dollar pilot. So we'll see if that kind of takes over and moves people towards that direction, raises a whole lot of other privacy concerns and everything else in the crypto industry. So it's going to be a very interesting ride, I think, here over the next couple of years as we see what happens there.
All right, our next story, Australia deals with MetaBank Fallout. The Australian Federal Police say they have identified the perpetrators of the now infamous extortion of health insurance company MetaBank, and we've been covering this as new developments have been coming out. Though they have not publicly named them, all signs point to actors in Russia. Coming so close on the heels of the Optus breach, Australia's Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill has proposed making ransomware payments illegal in Australia with the aim of decreasing profitability for such breaches. However, critics of the proposal say it would just move ransom payments underground using third parties in other jurisdictions to just get around the rules. So, John, not the first time we've heard discussions of not paying ransom, making that kind of a legislative priority. CISA made the same type of suggestion last year after the Colonial Pipeline breach. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Does paying a ransom help or hurt a company's cybersecurity position?
I think if you ask most CISOs, they will say never pay. But I mean, realistically, it's not our decision. It is the business decision as to whether or not you're going to pay a ransom. And you work with your team, you help them understand the risks, you help them understand that if you do pay it, are you potentially setting yourself up to for future attacks that you're now a target that is known to pay, or are you paying because you know that you're going to be able to recover in 2 weeks now instead of 6 months? So that's all the factors that you have to work with your business on, and hopefully you're having these conversations with your business now before an incident happens, so you can have your playbooks ready and know where those thresholds are to determine when you make those payouts versus not doing it.
Yeah, I would say that's been the biggest change I've seen in the industry over the past 2 years is kind of having everyone on board. So there's just so much less lag in that decision making process. Even though I'm sure parts of the business still disagree with stuff, it seems like that has been definitely a point of emphasis, at least for larger organizations over at recent times.
Hopefully for smaller organizations as well, is that they, as I said, they need to have their playbooks ready and know when to pivot.
All right, next up here, 98% of organizations have been severely impacted by cyber supply chain breaches. A recent report, specifically Blue Voyant's third annual global survey on cyber risk management, cited 98% of its 2,000 respondents had experienced negative impacts of a cyber breach in their supply chain. The report also found that 40% of respondents rely on third party vendors or suppliers to ensure security. The industry as a whole reported a lack of understanding and communication across the enterprise regarding the role of cybersecurity. So, John, we have three major statements coming out of this report. Which one, I'm curious, kind of sparks your interest here, or perhaps all three?
I think all three do. I think the 98% is just really the old adage of it's not if, it's when. And every business is using third parties, whether they realize it or not. And with the rise in SaaS-based services and more companies moving to the cloud, they're relying on third parties to help in many different ways of their infrastructure and their business processes. We saw last year with the Kronos outage, and companies were not able to do their end of year financial processing or payroll because of that. And so trying to help the business understand all the potential risks that their third parties provide and why we need to improve third party risk management is a huge part of this. Um, I think most businesses today just they don't have the understanding, and we just need to talk with them more and more. And then we need to work with our vendors on better third party risk.
Yeah, providing more visibility into that from a vendor perspective, I think, is key here. John, I thought I heard a connection issue. Are you still with us? Looks like we have lost John for just a moment here, but I'm going to keep going here with the news. And John, when you jump back on, we will get live again. Our next story here, thousands of sites used for brand impersonation. This one definitely caught my eye this week. Turns out massive brand impersonation isn't just a problem for Twitter these days. According to a report from researchers at Cyjax, China-based threat actors known as Fengxiao operate a massive network of over 42,000 domains meant to impersonate popular brands. These redirect users to adware, dating sites, and fraudulent giveaways, generating revenue from clients who pay for traffic. The group appears to register roughly 300 new brand domains daily. John, are you back with us here?
I hope I am.
Fantastic. Well, we're just talking about this new report from Cyjax here about brand impersonation and this group based out of China that's registering 300 new brand domains daily. John, this is definitely something I feel like is of interest to you. Obviously, this type of impersonation isn't old. I mean, we've had impersonations for basically as long as we've had humans, but given that iconic clothing brands your company represents, Wrangler, Lee, these would be squarely in the crosshairs of these agile brand impersonators. I'm curious how you deal with this.
With a lot of work. This is actually it is a big problem. We've seen a huge increase this year across the entire retail industry. I speak frequently with my CISO counterparts across both the retail and hospitality industries, and for us, we see a lot of variations of the word Wrangler. The challenge we have is Wrangler and Lee are both such common words. If someone pops up something called Code Wrangler, their version of GitHub, or they'll or things about Wrangler Jeeps, or things like that. So we spend a lot of time with our intelligence feeds trying to filter through and understand of all the different domains that are popping up that are trying to impersonate our brands, which ones are actually relevant to us versus not. So we're partnering with our legal teams to then do takedown notices where appropriate, and then identifying where we should be purchasing those domains. So it's a lot of discussions with our legal teams, our threat intelligence feeds, and everything else. And it's a very big task right now.
All right. Well, before we move on to our next story, we have to spend a few moments with our sponsor, App Omni. Can you name all the third-party apps connected to your major SaaS platforms like Salesforce and Microsoft? What about the data these apps can access? After all, one compromised third-party app could put your entire SaaS ecosystem at risk. With App Omni, you get visibility to all third-party apps, including which end users have enabled them and the level of data access they've been granted. Visit appomni.com to request a free risk assessment. All right, well, we've got the World Cup coming up, and privacy experts are cautious about FIFA World Cup apps. The FIFA World Cup in Qatar kicks off literally on Sunday and has been mired in controversy since the country won the hosting honor. Now, privacy experts say the two official apps are cause for concern. Ataraz is a COVID-19 tracking app, and Heya follows fans' entrances to and from the stadium. The latter requires full network access and unrestricted access to personal data. Oyvind Vesayan, the head of security at the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, said, "It's not my job to give travel advice, but personally, I would never bring my mobile phone on a visit to Qatar." Aside from just being a terrible tagline for the Qatar Tourism Association, not bringing your phone's probably a no-go for quite a number of people. It's not clear how mandatory these apps will be for admission to the stadium. Most cybersecurity experts are suggesting using burner phones for the trip. Government mandated apps, things like COVID tracking apps, have been seen in recent years, all seem to be laden with a wide variety of potential issues around privacy and security. I'm curious, what advice do you have for these types of tracking apps, either here in the U.S. or specifically around the World Cup in Qatar?
Well, I think the first thing we need to point out is that more of the people who are going to the World Cup are going to be concerned about the lack of beer there than they are going to be about their privacy. Unfortunately, although those in security will definitely be very concerned. It's kind of like traveling to DEF CON, and you never want to take your mobile phone there either. And so I think this is an ongoing problem we have with apps on mobile devices, is that they're tracking everything, and many of them are doing it up front. They're telling you in the terms and services that they are tracking either your GPS coordinates or your keystrokes and all of that. There's been uproar about TikTok doing it. There's been uproar about Twitter doing it, and many other companies. I think eventually we're going to need to see something around maybe a standards body around how we do deployment of stuff on apps. Will we eventually see a privacy law in the U.S. that helps guide it? Probably not at the federal level, but at definitely at different state levels, which then could push the industry to change there as well on how apps are getting deployed. And then the biggest problem, of course, is control of the app deployments with all the different app stores where you can download from, side loading, and all the different ways to try to get around any controls that are in place. So it's going to be a big challenge to really address it. And unfortunately, I think people are starting to get complacent to the idea that their privacy is gone already and that their data is already out there, and so they're just not worrying about it.
Yeah, and especially in a situation like with the World Cup, I mean, it may just be, well, my back's against the wall. What other choice do I have? I don't think for your everyday user, sure, for your security expert or something like that, or government agents, the idea of a burner phone maybe isn't that foreign. But I think for just your everyday user, they feel like, well, I guess I just traded my privacy here to do World Cup stuff, and that's the end of that.
They're already used to, they'll have a conversation with a friend, and all of a sudden they get ads related to it popping up on their phone. So I think most people are they're starting to get complacent with the idea, and I hope there's something we can find as an industry to help highlight that problem for the users and leverage some change.
Standards and protocols. I like that. That's always a good idea, I think. Next up here, Musk ultimatum to employees leaves Twitter at risk. What's happening has been Twitter's tweet prompt for years. Now it appears to be its mission statement. In an email to staff entitled "A Fork in the Road," Elon Musk said employees had until the end of the day on Thursday to decide whether to be part of so-called Twitter 2.0, and those who stay should expect to work long, intense hours. I believe he referred to it as hardcore. He's also offering 3 months severance to those who leave. It appears many more workers are declining to say, signing off with the salute emoji, potentially putting Twitter's operations at risk. As of this morning, it seems Twitter might actually close its offices until Monday, supposedly over concerns about perhaps industrial espionage from people that are potentially leaving. So, John, my question for you, Elon Musk has already guaranteed himself immortality in business school case studies for many of his successes, things like Tesla and SpaceX, undeniably successful. But here we see someone who suddenly appears to be very much out of his depth when it comes to a pure management perspective. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about his actions and his options going forward, especially when we've seen his entire C-suite gutted, specifically their CISO stepping down last week?
Well, as you noted, you can't really claim the guy's not a bright person. He definitely knows how to build technology and build companies. His management skills, in my view, are not the greatest. And I know he's made statements about, well, at least all the best are staying. Um, I'm used to the adage that those that can leave do. And you end up being left with those who can't leave. So I'm very worried about Twitter as a company. It's one of the best tools for the security industry for sharing information, and so it has a great impact on our industry if it does falter any further. I hope that they're able to recover. Elon has, he's gone through similar things with Tesla and other companies. So I really do hope it gets better. But right now, it's very concerning to me that we're going to lose one of our best communication tools out there.
Yeah, and with the core engineering teams reportedly leaving, we don't have confirmation of that. I think that's the immediate concern for if you're a Twitter user is how stable would the service be going forward. Next up here, 10 new ransomware families on the scene in the last 6 months. This finding comes from Ivanti's ransomware report from Q2, Q3. Overall, those 10 new families led to a total of 170 documented ransomware families actively seeking to exploit targets. It also found some troubling gaps in ransomware prevention. 18 ransomware vulnerabilities did not get surfaced by popular scanners. The rise in ransomware vulnerabilities also saw a lag in government response, with 124 vulnerabilities not added to CISA's mandatory patch list. The report corroborates anecdotal reports that healthcare, energy, and critical manufacturing remain the most targeted industries of ransomware. So, John, I'm curious, it's all kind of guaranteed that ransomware strains will evolve over time. What are your thoughts regarding this report's findings specifically?
The finding doesn't really surprise me. The as you mentioned, there will continue to evolve, and as we come up with solutions to prevent them, they'll find other ways again. We are just now seeing a resurgence of USB based attacks with ransomware, with the Raspberry Robin attacks that occurred a few months ago, and all in response to Microsoft. Turning off macros by default. So we're going to just see that constant evolution. 10 new families. I'm a little surprised the number's that low. I would expect it to be higher, just because of all the possibilities out there. A lot of companies, though, are finally starting to wake up that they shouldn't necessarily just follow the government's the CISA report. They should be looking at their own risk profiles and identify where their critical apps are, where they may need to make sure they're patching. Hopefully, they've got very strong vulnerability management policies and programs in place, so they're addressing the low-hanging fruit and getting those taken care of. But they just need to be watching for all the other stuff. It's the 0 days they're still going to bite us. We can't really do a whole lot there. There are some tactics that can be deployed, but it's gonna take a lot more diligence on the security teams.
And our last story for today, the effectiveness of Ukraine's IT army. At the G20 summit's digital transformation panel, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the country's IT army successfully stopped over 1,300 Russian cyber attacks since the start of Russia's invasion earlier this year. He also pointed to lessons other countries could adopt to deal with modern cyber warfare. This ranged from shifting to cloud hosted public registers to keep up benefits to those displaced by the war, to how it kept its Dia state site operational with over 100 contactless public services. This allowed Ukraine to keep offering things like digital passports, tax services, and other critical infrastructure. I mean, John, war has always been a place of good business and good learning, despite the fact that many lives will pay for it. What have you observed in this most cyber of recent wars?
Well, first off, kudos to Zelensky for not bloating the number. Saying 1,300 when he could have probably easily said 1,300 per hour.
Yeah.
For if they're looking at just the amount of traffic they're getting attacked by. So yeah, I'm very surprised that they stuck with that lower number, which means they're probably talking about the legitimate full blown attacks. But it's really just kind of shows the strength of having a strong incident response capability, and being able to really think about what are all the potential response options, regardless of what the attacks look like. Having a whole cadre of options behind you so you can pivot easily. Was, I think, what's being a real success for them. So I think that their IT army is just doing a fantastic job, given the type of environment they're in. At least when I'm being attacked, it's just a cyber. I'm not getting shells thrown at me as well.
Yeah, certainly that it's coupled with quite literally a hot war is seems unprecedented, at least from the Western perspective that we have seen, and we'll definitely keep following that developments that we see out of Ukraine from a cyber perspective in weeks to come, as I'm sure there will be updates. But John, before we get you out of here, any thumbs up or eye roller story for you? Something you reacted strongly to?
The Twitter one is the one I react the most strongly to. It's just crazy out there. It's affecting a lot of my own brethren in the industry, security researchers that work for Twitter and things like that. And just it's just how crazy it is. It's like watching a train wreck happen in real life and hoping the train doesn't completely wreck.
Yeah, for sure. I don't feel like you're alone in that. So again, if as we get more, cyber specific updates to that, we will keep that story up to date for sure. But John Scrimsher, the CISO at Kontoor Brands, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find more of your stuff online if they're so inclined to check it out?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best spot. I do a lot on LinkedIn, and I can also be found on Twitter as long as it's still there.
For sure. What a wonderful time that we live in. Well, thank you also to our sponsor, App Omni, secure third party apps to keep SaaS data safe. A reminder there will be no episodes of Super Cyber Friday or this show next week on account of the Thanksgiving holiday, celebrating our own Black Friday. But you can still get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all up to date. And you can also subscribe to the show through our newsletter on LinkedIn. There, you can read and or hear the show right from the newsletter. Just go to the CISO Series page on LinkedIn to subscribe. Until next week, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.